Greetings and welcome to a special edition of aBlogtoWatch Weekly. This week we are featuring a production in association with our friends at Breitling. This was recorded during Geneva Watch Days, but was being left for a very special moment. You may have seen in the watch press some information about what we're now going to talk about, but David, do reveal all.
Exactly. You are about to listen to a great discussion with the global head of sustainability, no less, at Breitling. And to give you a context on why this is important, regular readers of aBlogtoWatches who have been reading us for several years might have noticed that, sometimes we make these calls early, that, hey, something's gonna blow up, something's gonna, just become really important in the world of watches. And that was true about watches getting smaller. We were saying that, 5 years ago when this was totally not at all happening, and yet it's all over the place, about colorful dials and a number of other smaller and greater developments in the industry. And now we have been covering the issue of sustainability and transparency, or lack thereof, in the watch industry every now and then. And we are saying that, look at this, look out for this, because in the next 3 to 4 years maximum, all the big groups and all the big brands will start saying, oh, okay, we are sustainable, we are just very conscious and whatever. But the question is, who starts first? And Breitling is really making tremendous progress now, as you will see with this launch. So with the Super Chronomat Origins, which is very important to them because it's the first one in their selection that has sustainable gold that is sourced in a traceable way, all the way from the mine, from this artisanal mine, where fair wages are paid, where they look out for the ecosystem and all that. And this will create this ripple effect across the industry. It's a greater discussion, and the same goes for lab-grown diamonds, which this piece also has. And by 2025, Breitling promises to have all of its gold from such mines and all of its diamonds to be lab-grown diamonds. This is, of course, part of a greater discussion for the luxury industry. I think this is very important to listen to, because what you're about to hear will be a defining feature of the watch industry for the next 3 to 5 years at least.
You may be sitting there going, oh, I don't want to listen to another thing about environmentalism or sustainability, but genuinely, this is worth your attention. This is an organisation taking it properly seriously, and hopefully you hear us asking some questions which are proper questions, challenging the statuses, all of which I have to say were responded to very, very well. So enjoy the episode, sit back, relax, get a cup of tea, get a drink, whatever takes your fancy, sit back, relax, and have a listen to this special episode produced alongside Breitling.
Enjoy the show.
Greetings and welcome to another aBlogtoWatch Weekly special, and we're at the Breitling headquarters for Geneva Watch Days here in, obviously, Geneva. David, who are we sitting down with from the good ship Breitling?
So we have the privilege to chat with Aurelia Figueroa. She is the head of sustainability, or sustainability officer of Breitling. If I say that correctly, I like to get titles right. Was that okay?
Head of sustainability, you get it right. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. And I remember 2 years ago, there was a similar Breitling get-together here, and we just ended up at this dinner, and we just started talking about sustainability, which is a very important topic, I presume, to all of us, to the listeners, and also to us, and especially, of course, since it's your field of expertise. And now we are here, and we have one of the first pieces from Breitling that are a very tactile and physical realization of the goals and the values that we were discussing. So before we get into the watches, could you please introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, David. Thanks a lot. It's really good to be here with you today and to talk about sustainability and pick up on that conversation we were having 2 years ago here in Geneva. So I'm Aurelia Figueroa. I'm head of sustainability at Breitling. I have been in this role for 2 years. I'm the first person to hold the role, and I think that we have a really exciting opportunity here at the brand to raise awareness both among our customer base and more broadly, and have some volume on sustainability while doing everything we can within our sphere of influence.
So is your background one of being an expert on sustainability and environmental matters, or is your background the watch industry and then you've transferred into this kind of realm?
So I've worked in sustainability for 15 years, so my entire career, and I've worked both on the environmental and social aspects of sustainability. I've had one other stay in the watch industry, which was about 2.5 years. And I'm really glad to be back here at Breitling today to work on this from the perspective mainly of sustainability specialization. I never call myself a sustainability expert. Because I don't think I am one. And I think it's really hard to be one. Something that's so rapidly evolving, maybe if you achieve that, it will be around for a New York minute. Yeah, I'm specialized in sustainability. That I can definitely say.
And so within the world of the watch industry, where do you find yourself in the process? Have you managed to transfer from being the end of the process whereby everybody does their thing and goes, right, now, is this environmentally friendly? Is this sustainable, to the start of the process?
Thank you, Rick, because that is such a key question that you just asked, this temporal aspect to it. And I could not agree more with you because, I won't say worst case scenario. I guess worst case scenario is nobody even asks, right? So that's zero. The next step on the scale is, we made this product. How does it perform? At least you're asking the question. So we are fortunately at the stage with Super Chronomat Origins that we asked these questions before we had a prototype. And we all sat together. So that's George, that's our top management, that's engagement also from externals to really provide feedback to us to say, where can we have social impact? Where can we have environmental impact? How can we guarantee product integrity and have a positive outcome for product, for planet, and for people? And this Super Chronomat Origins is now the first piece, and we can get into it shortly, so I'll wrap it up concisely to bitter gold, so fully traceable from a specific mine to the wrist, and traceable lab-grown diamonds. And this is for us a starting point. We will achieve both of these across the entire Breitling product portfolio by 2025, and we enable third-party verification along the way. Because these are big claims that we're making, and it's good if Breitling says we did the following, we wanted to do that and say it. And SourceMap, our partner on that, has also looked through everything at great detail.
So it's probably worth going into a bit of detail about what is sustainability, because I think a lot of people will think environmentally friendly and green when they think sustainable, but actually it's a lot wider than that. And the reality is, in the watch world, the things that are made are really quite small. It's not like you're operating a fleet of oil tankers or a petrochemicals plant. So actually sustainability is probably a lot more people focused, how you impact other people and relationships as much as it is, are you recycling your cardboard in the office?
I know, absolutely. So fortunately, I think also given the state of climate emergency that we're under, the topic of planetary boundaries of environmental sustainability has advanced. There's also mechanisms whereby you can measure your impact and report on this. And I think where we need to see more broadly as a society catch up is on these social issues. Socioeconomic inequality, obviously a relevant topic considering the luxury industry, of which I believe, is a symptom of socioeconomic inequality. And I think here we really have the chance to engage along our supply chain on these topics. So for example, by ensuring that everyone who's contributed to the gold and diamonds in this watch have been paid a legal wage, who have positive working conditions, that you're not contributing to a false floor in the labor market by supporting forced labor. And being able to confidently say that is not something that I think was possible prior. When you think of recycled gold, which 5 days ago could have come from an artisanal mine or a large-scale mine, or diamonds, especially the small diamonds we use, which are very limited in traceability. So those are obviously key topics for us of how can we engage people along our supply chain, and our supply chain is then obviously from the origins to the customer. And I think with this product, we're really going to have the opportunity to raise our voice in a positive way on this subject, because now we really have a reference point to say, and we've integrated it into our product. And we have something tangible, and we're rethinking those mechanisms, those processes that we have to consider how they can have a more positive social and environmental impact.
And when you were doing the whole supply chain analysis, did you come across any particular surprises?
Yes.
Complete areas, complete blind spots? It's obviously quite straightforward to think, well, where does the gold come from? Where do the diamonds come from? Any particular example you could give us?
The one that's top of mind for me right now, the biggest surprise was just the comparison for steel. So it's really straightforward if you think back on it, but we had some interest to address steel. We conducted a full scope product carbon footprint, and we saw that steel, the steel industry is huge, right? So yes, there's steel in watches, but it's nothing. So while the steel industry as a whole all needs to decarbonize. In fact, we see that it accounts for not even 1% of our emissions. So when we see messaging in the industry about recycled steel, it's all good and well. We all need to do our part, but it's not shifting the needle. We're talking about maybe tens of tons of carbon there. So that was a big surprise to us. And then there was a really clear alignment then among the gold and the diamonds and product integrity.
So you mentioned steel as having like a 1% contribution.
Not even 1%.
So what are some of the bigger factors in the operation of
Actually,
a watch
it's gold
manufacturer?
sourcing.
Really?
And so we saw by engaging in artisanal and small scale gold that we could have a greater net impact by having a handprint, thinking beyond footprint. But okay, if we positively engage with these mines to transition away from mercury, to have more positive environmental practices, actually the amount that we can avoid is greater than if we stick with the status quo of recycled gold, where you're not going to be able to find deltas, or the deltas will be as a result of incremental change over time. It's already an industry that's fairly optimized. It can continue to be optimized, no doubt. But we really saw the opportunity of like, okay, that's where net impact can occur.
It's fascinating. I remember reading I don't want to say something stupid, but I think it was like a WWF report.
2018 or
2018, something like that, on the sustainability of the watch industry.
Yeah.
And it was shockingly bad. So most of the companies got an F, basically, or maybe an E.
Yeah.
And just very, very few, literally one or two luxury brands actually stood out. And most brands, including some of the biggest names you can think of, got an F because they just simply didn't reply to even like the inquiry. And I was like, how unbelievably convenient that is to work at these brands, receive such an email from WWF. It was not like somebody like, hey, I'm a Mr. Nobody and I care about these things, but WWF. And they were like, I'm sure someone sat down at some point at these brands and said, what should we do? And let's just not reply. I was like, how much of a finger that is to the customers and to everyone in this industry. And they can blame secrecy. And I'm like, it's not about secrecy anymore. You owe this when you make literally hundreds of thousands of something, right? So my question is, what are the difficulties when it comes to like the famous secrecy of the watch industry, and how can you move away from that?
Yeah.
For those that, this is a podcast, you just close their eyes and looked into the distance.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a key question that we had with Super Chronomat Origins because we're disclosing the suppliers. And there's a handful of suppliers that meet our criteria. And we expect demand to grow for these materials. So it could be a competitor perhaps is now contacting these suppliers because we're basically like, you want to build this supply chain? Here's how you do it.
Right.
And, was there a brief discussion about that? Yes, of course. And we said, no, we're doing transparency. You're going to say who the supplier is. And we believe that we have a strong relationship with the suppliers. We're continuing to build it. We feel confident that we'll maintain that.
Yeah, sounds good.
It's fine if others want to contact them.
And they should. And maybe like new suppliers will come to the market and say, hey, this seems to work. And there's an entire industry called the luxury watch industry that we could supply. So hopefully new minds like this will adapt these practices and that will lead us forward.
Well, they're just about to open gold mines in Scotland, so we can give you some
Really?
supply chains, artisanal gold mines in Scotland.
There you go.
There you go.
I was thinking about lab-grown diamonds, and they've been on my mind ever since I first read about them because I was like, this is amazing. I like diamonds, not because you have to dig a huge hole in the ground and they're difficult to find. I like them for their physical properties.
I do too.
Right?
Yes. I love diamonds, I have to say.
Because they are like super hard. They are amazing in the sense that in anything, we're surrounded in this huge and very expensive ballroom in a 5-star hotel in the middle of Geneva. And these tiny little stones are harder and can resist anything in here. You could put the entire building on them and they would be like, whatever. Right? And the physical properties also lead to like a light show and something interesting to happen. But I don't want to damage the environment just to be able to enjoy them. So my question is, how do lab-grown diamonds compare? Because I know you still need a huge amount of energy to create a diamond. So what's the ratio between a lab-grown diamond versus the footprint of a natural diamond?
So on mine diamonds, I can only speak generally because the data available is very general and most of it is sponsored by the natural diamond industry. So I think it's fair to say it's not objective. For our diamonds, I can also speak about that because obviously we ask our suppliers to complete carbon accounting. And as a baseline, they're all carbon neutral. We know that's only a starting standpoint, they're in the process where they are not already using clean energy. They're using a mix of energies across the board of transitioning to renewable power. And we've supported one of our lab-grown suppliers to transition to solar energy. So we deployed the Breitling Carbon Fund. We place a voluntary shadow price on carbon, and we allocated a portion of that to finance 10% of a large-scale on-site solar plant for him. And climate and carbon is a very important issue, obviously, given the nature of the emergency that we're in. As you know, it's not only that, it's also water and biodiversity. And that's where we're seeing one of the biggest shifts between mined diamonds and lab-grown diamonds. And again, since traceability is almost non-existent for the small Malay stones, we couldn't testify to social and environmental standards if we're referencing an envelope, which is the level of traceability by and large in the industry right now for diamonds. And to me, that's not traceability. So we see a really positive potential there, and especially having entered the market when we did, to identify these suppliers, agree on the fact of, okay, these are our shared values. This is how we're going to achieve them in the near term. Let's start business now and work it out together.
Yeah, I think it's important to emphasize the fact that these are not easy goals. It's not like it's a snap of a finger and then you suddenly find gold and it's easy and it's right by your feet and you can just turn it into a watch case. Likewise with diamonds, right?
Exactly. And if we waited until this was perfect, you wouldn't have that watch in your hands right now. We would still be in a boardroom.
Yeah, exactly.
Get going.
Yeah, and it's also pushing the entire industry, which is what this is about. It's about, just the watch industry is actually a lot of the times more dynamic than people give it credit for, because there are like a few trailblazers in some of these different areas. And sustainability, I feel like, is a low-hanging fruit that so few reach for just at this point. And I applaud those brands who do, because I feel like, why would you want to be suddenly those who don't do this become that much more like outsiders? Like, why would I support them if I have the option to do this? I think it's a big push to today's customers. Have you benchmarked or have you reached out to customers or done surveys or something, or do some other research to better understand where the customer stands?
What we did at the very outset of our journey was we conducted a materiality assessment among a range of stakeholders in which customers were included to identify what they were interested in. And at that time, the feedback were the top 3 topics among 10 were social and environmental impacts along the value chain, 2 different ones, and then product integrity. And so it was on that basis of like, okay, this is where the focus is, that we said, we looked at our material portfolio and we said, based on this, how do we achieve that? And we saw the greatest urgency and value in running on gold and diamonds first.
Yeah, I also remember like last year, I think it was, or maybe 2 years ago when we were discussing, maybe it was just planned. Like there's some sustainable packaging for various different Breitling watches, and if you went to a store you would get this eco box basically, and you could ask for the nice one if you care about. But the brand realized, which I think is true, speaking for myself, is that however impressive these boxes are, sometimes you just put them on the shelf or just in your basement or wherever, and you never look at it again. But the impact is still there. So of course it's like a traditional industry, the luxury industry, but people are slowly moving away from that. And so what I would like to transfer towards is like other components of a watch where sustainability is concerned, let it be the box, the strap, or other elements, or the boutiques
in which it's sold.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, think about all of the materials that we have there. We have glass, stainless steel, wood, concrete, a range of materials. And if you think just about leather, the amount of leather that we use for furnishings far exceeds that of the straps. The straps are small. So exactly, we're really trying to look across the whole Breitling environment.
And to what extent have your authorized dealers also been coming to you because of their own corporate social responsibility needs, saying, right, Breitling, you're a brand we sell, what are you doing?
Yeah, we're absolutely getting that across jurisdictions. I get a questionnaire from a retailer at least once a month, which is good. I'm glad to see that. And I think a lot of it is obviously driven by upcoming legislation.
From their point of view. So what is next? We've obviously got the watch that you've shown us today. What can we expect to see coming next that fits into this model?
I think that it's going to be just a scaling up of our ambition level across our sustainability pillars. So again, product, planet, people, progress, and prosperity. And it will be a mix of really ambitious targets that to me are classified as radical innovation. So that's 100% traceable to the origin gold by 2025 and 100% traceable and responsible lab-grown diamonds by 2024. So we have these radical innovations underway. We have a range of incremental innovations to support those, building the sustainability base among all our suppliers beginning to raise that floor up in a really step-by-step process, because this has to happen too, and then scale up of ambition as it comes to planet. So this is something that's coming forth in our 2022 sustainability mission report, where we will be featuring targets there as well. And what we see in our 2022 sustainability mission report is we're now committing to 100% carbon neutrality across all of our measured emissions. So we measure across scope 1, 2, and 3. That's all a bunch of lingo. To break it down for everyone, that means that we're measuring for emissions that are occurring at Breitling premises and in our supply chain. So for example, if we source a gram of gold, what is the climate impact? If we source pane of glass for a Breitling boutique, what is the carbon impact? If we sponsor an ad on the Burj Khalifa, what is the carbon impact? And accounting for all of that. And as a baseline, offsetting everything and establishing a meaningful price on carbon and transparently communicating on that. So applying the guidance of the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition, increasing our voluntary internal price on carbon to 40 francs per ton, and using the resulting carbon fund to support carbon reduction efforts among our key suppliers and partners.
So do you see any particular projects that will offset directly by your input as opposed to by the sort of carbon trading? Is there anything you're specifically going to do in terms of, I don't know, planting trees or some other decarbonisation?
Absolutely. So we will be focusing on reforestation. That's something that we do both with our carbon fund and through corporate volunteering activities, where from Greece to the UK to Switzerland, employees are engaging in full-day events where they're really going into nature and making a tangible contribution on a local scale, to using our carbon fund to support suppliers in reducing their carbon. So a really concrete example of how we did that in the last year is we conducted the first carbon footprint at the mine from which we source 100% of its supply. And then we were able to identify the hotspots in terms of their emissions. One of those was the use of a diesel generator on site. And we asked them, is there a grid connection? Why are you using this? And they said, yes, there is a grid connection. However, in the rainy season, it typically doesn't work because it's a really old grid. We said, okay, how much will it cost to restore it? And we got the estimate and we contributed 50% of the funds. And that's something that we'll be able to see the reduction in carbon moving forward. So just kind of really tangible projects, both in our supply chain and at Breitling. The example of the watch boxes, reducing our emissions because of the change in material and the change in logistics, and also our commitment to use 100% renewable energy by 2025, which will also contribute to our reductions.
And how many of the suppliers that you've actually approached have you been able to change their attitude so that they can stay as suppliers but under a more carbon friendly, rather than just selecting a brand new supplier? Yeah,
so we're able to count over 70% of direct suppliers to date. We've been able to engage in sustainability, and it's been a really rewarding process. So we've uncovered extraordinary practices that the suppliers just weren't communicating about. We've also uncovered instances where the suppliers just started running beautifully fast in one direction. Like, I'm thinking of one supplier who already uses 100% renewable energy. They're using 100% biogas. They're recycling their waste heat. And I asked them about their carbon accounting, and they said, carbon what? And I thought, wow, you're super advanced on like just implementing and getting it done. You haven't heard of carbon accounting yet. I mean, who has heard of carbon accounting? It's totally understandable. And they didn't have a person directly dedicated to this role. So we said, this is how you put it in place. They're smart people. It's like, okay, done. Results are very positive. So it's been a really rewarding process. And I think through that, we get to explore our values together and really see our shared values. So then that's good for the supplier relationship. Unfortunately, we have a team in sustainability at Breitling. So we just lend out our expertise. They lend out their expertise. I mean, we're all learning from each other as we need to.
And is there any particular cultural engagement whereby you found it's much easier to speak to, I don't know, South American suppliers rather than Far Eastern, or Middle Eastern rather than Australasian, because there's a cultural attitude already ingrained in terms of sustainability, or certain areas of the world are just think about this more?
You know, I would say, to me, sustainability is so personal that I wouldn't attribute it to a region. I would really attribute it on the personal level. And it's honestly of my belief, based on the work I've been conducting in the last 2 years and more broadly, that I do believe that generally speaking, somehow there is, at a minimum, a shred of interest in sustainability in all of us, but maybe from a different angle. You know, we all have different perspectives. And I think those are the seeds that we've been able to find in our field. from which we can really grow this collaboration together of like, oh, you're really passionate about that. Super. Like, let's run on it. Based on your knowledge of that, what do you think it means for this? And developing it from there.
That's excellent. My question is, I'm looking at this new piece, and I was wondering if there's like a plan for a visual identifier to something like whenever you look at the product and it says, hey, I'm sustainable. Or it's like, is there a plan for something like that? And because, like us who like watches, sometimes you can tell, we look at the product and we say like it's double signed, and you can tell like from the other end of the room that it's like a special piece for this and that, because it carries a certain message or something like a certain moment in the history of that brand. And I think this is an important moment, not just in the history of Breitling, but also for the entire industry. So I was wondering if there was like a possible visual identifier that people could go like, this is what I look for, and that's telling me that you have a sustainable watch.
It's a really good question. I feel definitely outside of my zone of expertise on that. I wish I was better at marketing and communications. It's definitely not my forte.
Okay.
So I feel a bit out of depth on that question, I have to say.
Well, I think we consider ourselves sustainable experts in marketing over here. We'll partner with you to come up with this.
We have sustained ourselves.
We have sustained ourselves. We've managed to stay alive in Geneva for 2 days without much external help.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm sure we could work on that together. Fantastic.
We've discussed what goes into the product, but I was also wondering about the manufacturer itself, right?
Yeah.
So I see the new Apple headquarters and whatnot, and there's always this talk about sustainability. And it's not like you can transform a watch manufacturer just like that, because it has various types of old machines that are still used for various purposes that you cannot replace and stuff like that. So what are the steps that you have already taken when it comes to the manufacturer itself to push it towards sustainability?
Yeah, I would look at that from a planet and a people perspective. And I mean, what we've already done is transition to 100% renewable energy. We raised the commitment to transfer to 100% biogas at HQ. As well in our latest mission report. And then we engage our employees in nature locally. So for example, I was thinking of this beautiful day that we had in 2021, where we went out with a forester into the local environment, and we conducted forest cleanup services, and we went on this nature walk where this brilliant man, it was like this encyclopedia of information, really engaged our employees on like, how do ecosystems function? How does your local ecosystem function? And to me, that I think is also the core, because I think that raises the level of sensitization. So then when we want to engage our employees in a plastic reduction initiative, it's like, yes, and not that, I mean, we are always the genesis of that. So many of our employees are already such friends of nature, but we can contribute to that just by raising awareness and allowing that to support our future initiatives. So zero plastic waste is another one that we have. And when you hear that in the watch industry, it may sound a bit disingenuous. In fact, we had 7 tons of plastic waste in our baseline year. And if that's a watch company,
that's a lot of stickers to take off a lot of Breitlings, isn't it?
Yes. Imagine what the scale is elsewhere. And we know what the scale is elsewhere. And we know what the state of the global emergency on plastic waste is. And we see the need to do our part. So we fundamentally engaged our stakeholders with Collaboratio Helvetica and Let's Talk Waste, 2 leading organizations in Switzerland who work on fundamental stakeholder engagement, where we took an entire day to really take a step back and say, okay, let's talk about plastic. Where is it in our lives? Where is it in our workplace? How do we want to redesign to reduce it? What are some of our shared initiatives and values that we wish to develop? So really engaging our people at the outset in these initiatives rather than a dictum on high, figure out how to implement it. No, we've really engaged them. That was our employees. Those were key suppliers that also handle plastic. Those are key initiatives, how we, within our walls, and then of course also beyond, are working on this planet and people intersection.
I feel like everywhere you look, there's a possibility, or there's a chance to make a positive difference, right?
There is.
Which is also shows just how little we've cared for these things for so long, for far too long. So it's really, I feel like this discussion is important because it shows how, you and the listeners and everyone can be part of this from the earliest of stages.
Yes.
You can tell, you can look back like 10 years from now, and I remember that chat, and I remember that brand that started this whole thing, or was there there at the very beginning of it all. In 10 years from now, I think we will be shocked to think that, oh, it's only been happening for 10 years, and we will have done a lot at that point. But, we are at basically like the stone ages of sustainability in so many ways.
We are.
We're looking at whatever like the bigger companies are doing all over the world. And I feel like aspirational products like a luxury watch and the luxury industry is where we look for first, because if you're saving money on your detergent, you want to like spend less on detergent. But when you're spending thousands and tens of thousands on something, you feel like there's surely some sort of a room for improvement. So you have to be like the trailblazers for this and aspirational, like, I don't know, idols for this.
I agree. I could not agree more. And I think there's an opportunity there to redefine what does status mean, and the luxury industry and status have been hand in hand for a long time. You want to show your status through some type of power or might that you have. I do know, though, that studies are really showing that the most legitimate forms of status are those which involve compassion. And I think increasingly as products can begin to integrate values in them in the sourcing, then we're starting to have a conversation about what defines status in our society. And that's so key. What's our North Star? And I see that meeting point of sustainability, luxury, status to be a really interesting, point of discussion.
Now, there will always be those that are like doubters, skeptics. There will be those who will be like, yeah, that's all very well and good, but how much is it going to cost me?
Mm-hmm.
So what is the impact you're seeing in this in terms of actual costs going forward? Do you think it's going to cost more? Do you think that actually as the scale builds, it comes back in and is positive? Where does it sit in the discussions with the other parts of the organisation, like marketing and sales, who are like, well, wait a minute, what does this mean for elsewhere in the organisation?
I think in terms of a net impact, if you look at the larger scale, some of the positive effects of increased supply chain reliability, these are going to be something that offset any particular costs which may arise in the nature of doing business in this manner. So I think looking at the overall scope, you see a net zero impact. I think sustainability has to be mainstreamed, and if it's not, then there will be a malice that's in place for that, for sure.
Good to hear.
Excellent. I think, we have a lot to look forward to, a lot already to look back on, and finally we have a watch that we can take into our hands and look at and marvel at. So that's happening, and, I look forward to seeing when we have an entire case made of a lab-grown diamond. You have to sign me up for that.
If I've learned anything this week so far, spending time with David, it's that he does love a good diamond.
I do.
Encrusted bezel.
Yes.
He's anyone's for a diamond. He's already volunteered to sell children he doesn't have, which I'm sure isn't a very sustainable practice.
I'm
sure that goes against.
I'm
sure that goes against one of the P's that's been mentioned.
It's probably at a low level of sustainability that you hold onto your children. Yeah, well, we'll see how that goes. But Aurelia, thank you so much. This is a wonderful insight into all your efforts
it's a real pleasure.
at Breitling into sustainability, and I feel like there's an entire industry waiting to follow in your footsteps for sure.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It was really good to be with you.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
So that was it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you appreciated from just the audio how seriously Breitling are taking this. I felt really engaged because they were really engaged. This was clearly something that they were taking seriously. It wasn't just window dressing. It wasn't just window dressing. It was a serious attempt to look at the entire organisation and actually go through it piece by piece, the supply chain. I'm big on supply chains. It's what I also do for a living. So I could identify that they were looking in exactly the right places and forming proper relationships. And once we'd stopped recording, the conversation continued. It wasn't just that's great, we've got our message across, let's move on. No, the people who were in the room were actually genuinely engaged in the process and keen and were fighting their corner. Although it did really seem like they didn't have to fight terribly hard because the whole organisation really does appear to be engaged in the process. And I was particularly impressed with the fact that they're being open book about it. They're sharing the supply chain so that others can get involved, which actually is the really big step that needs to be made, in my opinion. It's all very well big multinational companies figuring out how to do this stuff, but it only really bleeds through into the rest of society if the information is shared. It's like Volvo creating the 3-point seatbelt and then not patenting it because they realised it was important for everybody. Same sort of process. They have opened their books as to how to do this, and hopefully everybody else will now cotton on. Any particular highlights for you, David?
Absolutely. I think the lack of transparency that defined the watch industry and still continues to define it, it's shocking in a way that cannot be overstated. Given the margins on this product, they like to praise themselves, these brands, and this industry, I should say. And yet, the concern for, the sourcing of the gold, where it's coming from, all that, it raises a number of ethical questions that are really pressing, and about time that we address these. And, other luxury industries, fashion, what have you, automotive, have all taken this direction. And it was about time that somebody in the watch industry started. So stay tuned for, the developments of the watch industry with regards to sustainability. It's going to be an exciting and complicated journey because this is totally not how this industry has operated for the last 250 years.
Yes, so thank you very much for tuning in. Remember and tune in to our regular show on a Thursday. So it's goodbye from me. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.